Hi everyone. Today I'm working on my 2001 Isuzu Rodeo. I'm going to end up having to take it apart and pull the head on the driver's side of the engine because it broke down this week, and upon diagnosis had a compression test done, and the number 6 cylinder, which is the one closest to the firewall, has no compression at all, zero. So more than likely means it's got a burn valve. The valve's not sealing, and the cylinder is getting no compression. So I've never done any sort of repair this extensive on my own, so this is going to be a learning process. I figured I'd document it, and honestly this video will probably be just as helpful in showing you how not to do this as it will be to show you what the best way to do it is. But anyhow, I thought I would document it as I go, if for no other reason than to help myself remember how to put things back. But if all goes well, I'll try to post this so anybody else who has this issue may find benefit from it. Anyhow, you can see I've already started labeling things. I'm going to be pretty meticulous about labeling any sort of connection that I have to do. I know what most of it is, but you know, like I said, this is the first time I've done something to this extent, so it's going to be a little overwhelming when it comes time to hook everything back up. So even if I know what it is, I'm just going to label it. What I've done so far is just use a lettering system. So for instance, here's the throttle connection. I just labeled the wiring A, as well as the connection on the throttle body A. So when I go to put back together, I just match letter for letter. I think that'll work for me. By all means, you can come up with your own system if you have to do something like this. I think that'll work fine for me, but you can see I've already labeled a lot of things. I've still got plenty more to label. There's some things that I can't get to until I start taking some things apart. But anyhow, long story short, I think I'm going to start with removing the air filter housing and then the air intake boot, get that removed from the throttle body, and then sort of working my way back. In the end, I'll end up having to pull the fuel rails, all the injectors, the manifold. I'll have to pull this valve cover gasket, obviously, to get to the head. I'm a little concerned about the master cylinder back here being in the way. I hope I can get everything out without it. I'm told that you're not supposed to have to remove that, but in any case, like I said, this will be a learning process. I think I'm also probably going to end up pulling the skid plate off the bottom, just so I can get to the petcock on the radiator to drain it. I don't exactly know where it is yet. It's probably accessible from up top, but I figured if I pull that skid plate off, it'll help me look underneath as well. So in any case, I'm going to get started. I'll try to show a clip every so often of what I've removed and how I removed it. If I come into any snags, I'll try to show that. If I can offer any sort of helpful advice, I will. But again, this is going to be a learning experience, and we'll see how it goes. So without further ado, let me get to pulling some things apart, and I'll check back in with you in a minute. Okay, one of the first things I did, and I meant to mention this in the first clip, but one of the first things I've done is remove the spark plugs and coils. The vehicle was at a shop. They did a compression test. When I ended up getting it to limp back to my house, and I wanted to do my own compression test just to verify things. So I pulled all the spark plugs, all the coils, did my own compression test. There's some good videos out there on YouTube about how to do that. So it was dark when I did it. I didn't film that portion of it. I might do that later, but in fact, I probably will do it when I get things put back together, just to test the compression in the cylinder that I'm going to be repairing. So anyhow, to get to the spark plugs, you first have to remove the coils. That's one of the coils right there. It's got a 5/16 screw on either side. You remove those. Then of course there's a electrical connection going to each coil. You lift up on this tab and slide that off. Then you can lift the coil up out of its tube. Then at the bottom of that tube there will be the spark plug. Just need a spark plug wrench to get that out. Obviously there's 6 spark plugs. From my understanding, cylinders 1, 3, and 5 are on the passenger side. 2, 4, and 6 are on the driver's side. I labeled everything. Again, the coil wires, I labeled 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6 on the other side. I labeled each coil. I mean, they should be interchangeable, but I figured I'd just put them back where they came out of. Label all my spark plugs just so I could inspect them when I got them all out to compare. You know, if one looks much different than the others, you might have an issue going on. All mine, for the most part, look pretty similar. 6 looks a little bit different. Looks actually a little bit cleaner. Probably since there's no compression there, you know, there hasn't been much combustion going on. So I'm guessing that's why that plug looks different. But anyway, you can see I just made a little diagram with some cardboard and stuck the plugs in there. So that was the first thing I did. It's not necessarily the first step that you have to do, but it was what I needed to do to run the compression test. So anyhow, that's what got me to this point. Now I'm going to start disconnecting more stuff, and I'll check back in just a little bit. Okay, I'm ready to remove the air filter housing and the boot attached to it. There's 4 clips that hold the housing closed around the perimeter. There's an electrical connection here which connects to the mass airflow sensor. Just slides off. There's another connection here. I believe that's the intake air temperature sensor. Then there's a hose connection here. You've also got a ring clamp here. I believe that's a number 3 Phillips bit. So I'm going to finish disconnecting all those, and then I'll remove the assembly as one piece, and then I'll probably move on to the throttle body. Alright, air filter housing is loose, ready to come off the throttle body. I can set that aside. Now the throttle body is going to have 4 bolts, 2 here and 2 underneath. It's also going to have a coolant line connection on either side. Those are tricky to get to. It's got a hose clamp on either side. Let's see, you're going to have, once again, you'll have a connection here on the throttle body. And that should be it. Now, I may decide to go ahead and drain the radiator before I do this, because the coolant lines will have coolant in them. So I might do that first, actually. So let me pull that skid plate off, and then I'll try to figure out where the petcock is for the radiator. Alright, well, I tried to get the skid plate off the bottom of the vehicle, and the bolts were seized on there pretty good. So in order just to make some progress, I hit those with some PP Blaster. I'm going to let that soak for a while. Hopefully that'll help loosen those up. So I forged ahead and went ahead and just pulled the throttle body anyway. I wasn't too worried about the coolant coming out of those lines on the bottom. As you can see, I've already got it loose. Again, there's 2 bolts on the top, 2 bolts on the bottom. I believe those were 10mm. You've got an electrical connection here. That plugs up there. Just disconnect that. The wiring harness clips into these 2 hole slots in this this plate here, bracket. And again, you've got the coolant connections on the bottom. So anyway, what I did was take the bolts loose first so I could pull the throttle body out. Then I could get to the coolant lines. I've already disconnected them, but it's a lot easier to pull those off if you have some play and are able to pull the throttle body away from the intake. And then if you've watched my video on EGR cleaning, I did the same thing. I just plugged those lines with a couple of bolts and reconnected the hose clamps. So I did the same thing here. Now, just looking inside the intake, you can see there's the EGR tube. It's pretty filthy, and I don't know how well this will show up on video, but the inside of this intake is nasty. I cleaned the EGR tube about a year ago, and it didn't look this bad. but I'm guessing that maybe this has something to do with why that one valve seems to have gotten burned. You know, if the EGR port's not working correctly, I guess it can increase your exhaust temperatures quite a bit, which may have something to do with why that one valve has gone bad. But anyhow, it looks like this was due for a cleaning anyway, so obviously I'll be pulling this during the process of pulling the head, and I'll get this intake all cleaned up as well. So without further ado, I'm going to start pulling some more stuff off the top of the intake. These electrical connections have already been labeled for the most part. I got a few more to go, but I'll start pulling that loose. Hopefully I can get the skid plate off the bottom soon so I can drain the radiator, and then I'll try to get in here and pull the serpentine belt off and figure out what's next. So anyway, I just wanted to show that step. I'm going to move on, and I'll check back in just a little bit. Alright, now that I've got the throttle body out of the way, I can get to these connections here. To be honest, I'm not sure what all of these are. This is an electrical connection. This looks like I think this goes to the evap system. It traces back to here. It's got this port, comes around here. So I think that's part of the evap system. This is probably the some sort of control connection. So I've got all those labeled. There's a vacuum connection here that I've labeled. That'll need to come off the intake. All these connections up here I've disconnected and labeled. There's a couple more here that still need to be labeled. Another vacuum line here. Of course, the EGR valve itself, it's got a connection on it. I'll have to unbolt that. I can probably leave that on for now till I pull the manifold, although it might be easier to get the manifold out with that off, so I'll figure that out later. I'll also have to pull all the injector connections before I try to lift the fuel rail up out of place. So I've got all those labeled. So I'm just going to continue disconnecting things, and eventually I'll be able to pull the valve cover off. So let me keep plugging along. Okay, I just want to show a few more connections here on the manifold. There's a few ground connections here, here, and right there. There's also a vacuum line. So I just wanted to point that out, mainly just for my own reference when I go to put these back together. But so just don't forget to disconnect those as well.